Okay, the text is Adi Lila, chapter 7, text 76. So Adi 7, 76. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. So this is Adi Lila, chapter 7, text 76, if you like to find it on your phone. But luckily this verse you don't require a phone because everybody knows this verse. And this is the chapter called Lord Chaitanya in 5 Features, which is actually Mahavishnu Maharaj's favorite book. In the Prabhupada's time, actually, this was printed as a separate book. Now, maybe in India you can find it, Indian BBT, otherwise it's only within Chaitanya Charitamrita. But this is a very important chapter. So, and today's verse is none other than the Hare Nam Maiva Kevalam verse. Hare Nama, everyone, we can just chant together because everyone already knows it. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama Kevalam. Golo Naste, 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 Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama Kevalam. Golo Naste, 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 Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama Kevalam. Golo Naste, Naste, Naste. So this is a very important verse, as we all know, because this is emphasizing the importance of the chanting of the holy name. So today we're going to study a little bit about what is Yuga Dharma, what is the meaning of Yuga Dharma, and we'll study this particular verse. We'll study the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and we'll study what is the difference between forms of chanting this name and different things like that. So first we'll look at the text itself. So this actually text is coming from the Puranas, but Lord Chaitanya quotes it because it's very emphatic about the chanting of the holy name. And that was one of the reasons Lord Chaitanya came to inaugurate the Yuga Dharma. Therefore it's explained in Srimad Bhagavatam that Krishna Varna, Tisha Krishna, that he comes, although he comes in the category of Krishna, he doesn't come in the color of Krishna, which is black, but he comes as a golden form. Therefore he is known as Gauranga, one who is golden formed. Sangom Pangasha Parshadam. And he comes with all of his associates and all of his personal effects. Generally Vishnu, his personal effects means his weapons. And especially Vishnu Narayan, then you have the Shankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma. But Lord Chaitanya, he comes a little bit different. Why? Because he comes in the form of a devotee. And it's explained that he comes, his personal effects, for instance, is the sannyas staff and the water pot. So that's described in one nice song. So then, Yagya Sankirtana Praya, that he has come to inaugurate the Sankirtan Yagya, and those who are considered Sumedhasaha, of good intelligence, then they will participate in that Sankirtan Yagya. So it's very important, and therefore Lord Chaitanya has come. But actually the holy name is actually the form of the Lord in this age. And Lord Chaitanya is the one who has come to inaugurate that form. So that is what is referred to as Yuga Dharma. That is the form which one worships the Lord in this age. Let's see here. So I'll read the translation and the purport we'll do step by step because it's quite long. So we'll just do it step by step. So all of you already know, but we'll read it. For spiritual progress in this age of Kali, there is no alternative, there is no alternative, there is no alternative to the holy name, the holy name, the holy name of the Lord. So this is a very emphatic verse. And if you listen to, there's one devotee called Radhikaraman. Anyone heard of him? Yes. Did he ever visit Sweden? He did?
Oh yes, oh yes.
Few times.
Yeah.
So he was explaining.
He's coming also in September.
So he's coming again?
Yes.
Oh, good. So he explains that this is called Tritiya. Tritiya means third, and Anuprasa means what is following. So this technique of repeating something 3 times is a poetic and a scholarly and a shastric method of emphasizing. So if you say something 3 times, then it has the utmost emphasis. In other words, of superlative importance. So he explains that this is a very important technique, and it's not used regularly. It's used very sparingly for very, very important things. Because actually, generally in Shastra, a lot of things are repeated. Just like in the Gita, you'll find several themes, several points are repeated again and again as a didactic method of emphasizing and of reinforcing the same point to make it clear. But not often is this one used, which is Tritiya Anuprasha. Just general repetition here explained, that's called Punarukti. Punar means to do again, and Ukti means to speak, right? Like Uvacha, you say. So Punarukti just means to repeat. So that is generally used very often, but this repetition, the subset of these types of repetition, the triple repetition, that's very sparingly used. So that means that this is a very, very important verse. And if you look at the translation, not only is it used to say Hare Nama, but also Kolo Nasteva, 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 3 times for both of them. So specifically all mantras, all names, the Hare Krishna mantra or the name of Hari is very important. And not only that is what's important, but specifically why it's important, that there's no other way. That's also repeated 3 times. So it's actually very rare, it's extremely rare that you will find a verse which is like this, emphasizing so much. So therefore it's very important. And not only is it repeating 3 times, but Hare Nama is used in the possessive case. So that means it's very important, because generally you say Hari Nama, right? But when you put in possessive case, then you're also emphasizing that way as well, that is Lord Hari's name only. Because we find that there are so many demigods, right? It's just like in the Vedas it is explained that there is a 33 koti. 33 koti has 2 meanings. Generally we think it means 33 million demigods. But actually traditionally commentators say that 33 koti means 33 varieties of demigods. Like Adityas, Vasus, Indra, all of these. So there are 33 principal demigods, but only the name of Hari is the way which you can get liberation in this age. You can get the goal of life. So there's also emphasizing that, because in the context of the Vedas, as we know, that Krishna explains that in the Gita, that the Vedas generally they're dealing with the fruitive activity. They're generally emphasizing karma kanda, and karma kanda means generally working with the demigods. It's like if you want to do something in society, in the government, then you may, if you want to work, get some land, do some projects with the land, agriculture, then you'll go to Ministry of Agriculture. If you're interested in maybe improving the water system, the cleanliness of the water, the renewability of the water, whatever it is, then you have to go to the water department. So because people are interested in material, worldly things, then they have to approach gods. They want to approach gods in order to petition them for various things. But this verse is explaining that actually no, only the name of Hari is what can save you. Therefore, Nasteva Gati Ranyata. Gata means to go. Like in English you have the word go, that's a cognate with Ga in Sanskrit, which means to go. And Gati Ranyata. Anyata means there is no other way. So 3 times emphasized. So that's very important to realize that not only is Hari's name is important, but that there is no other way in this age of Kali. Kolo Nasti Eva. And Eva itself means certainly or definitely, so it's emphasizing there as well. So we can look a little bit at the purport. So I'll read the first paragraph. For progress in spiritual life, the Shastras recommend meditation in Satya Yuga, sacrifice for the satisfaction of Lord Vishnu in Treta Yuga, and gorgeous deity worship of the Lord in the temple in Dwapara Yuga. But in the age of Kali, one can achieve spiritual progress only by chanting the holy name of the Lord. This is confirmed in various scriptures. In Srimad Bhagavatam, there are many references to this fact. In the 12th canto, it is said, Kalo doshanide rajan asti eko mahanguna kirtanadeva krishnasya mukta sangha param vrajet. that in the age of Kali, there are many faults, for people are subjected to many miserable conditions. Yet in this age, there is one great benediction, that simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, one can be freed from all material contamination and thus be elevated to the spiritual world. So in the beginning of this paragraph, Prabhupada is explaining about the 4 Yuga Dharmas. So there are 4 Yugas, right, in this, what you call, cyclical concept of time. Generally in Western culture, Christianity, and also then, because it's influenced by Christianity, modern science, that they have the unproved assumption that time is linear. So therefore, this concept of Chatur Yugas is not present. Although you find it in pre-Abrahamic, most pre-Abrahamic cultures of the world, just like in Greek philosophy, they have the 4 ages. Sometimes it's described as 5, like the golden, silver, bronze, iron. Something like that. Sometimes they also say 5, but that is basically the same idea as the 4 yugas in the Vedic culture. So Satya Yuga is also known as Krita Yuga. So Krita Yuga, diet on Vishnu, meditating on Vishnu. So that's a very high level process. And that was actually the original Yuga Dharma, that's the normal Yuga Dharma. But everything that comes after that is just adjustment to do that thing. Because Dhyayatam Vishnu means to meditate on the Lord. Dhi means to meditate, to concentrate. So that's actually what you can call Patanjalian Yoga, or like Yoga Sutras. They're actually teaching the Yoga Marga, there's different paths. So the Yoga Marga is emphasizing just Samadhi. Samadhi means Samyak Dhyayan. So Samyak means complete. So Samadhi means the perfected Dhyana Yoga, that's called Samadhi. But that requires the path of Nivritti Marga, the path of renouncing the world, and that requires, very, very high level of meditation, concentration, and very strict adherence to yamas and niyamas. There are different yamas and niyamas given, like ahimsa. Ahimsa means obviously non-violence. And then you have satyam, truthfulness, asteyam, not stealing. And there are different yamas, 5 yamas, 5 niyamas. Brahmacharya, aparigraha, non-possessiveness. So there's different of these things. So you have to perfectly follow all of these in order to be 100% in the mode of goodness. And then when you do that, then you have to do yama, niyama, and then you do asana and pranayama. So you do some physical postures. Nowadays there are many more. They adjusted many more in the last couple hundred of years. But at least you can say there are many more which are in written form that we know about. But nowadays it's more emphasizing just asana with what you call yoga in the West. But asana is actually important. It's mentioned in the Gita, it's mentioned in the Bhagavatam, many, many places. So asana and pranayama. So first you have to regulate the body and the internal environment. So that's requiring asana and pranayama. And that helps to bring one more in the mode of goodness. Yamaniyam, asana, pranayama, pratyahara. And then that starts the process of withdrawing or starting to become more of an ascetic or more of a renunciate. So then you have pratyahara. Pratyahara means to withdraw all of the enjoyments of the senses, to withdraw everything that you're consuming. The prati means counter, ahara means literally means to consume, just like we hear in the Nectar of Instruction, that one should learn to control these things, right? So pranayam, pratyahara, and then dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. So those 3 are just the same thing, but different stages of meditation. So first, dharana means you're choosing your object of meditation, and then you're focusing on that object of meditation, and then that application is called dhyana, and when that dhyana becomes perfect and therefore realized, that's called samadhi. So that is the first process which is given. That is the normal, actually, traditional process of yoga. But because in other yugas people are not so pious, they're not so simple, they're not so renounced, just like in Satya Yuga there was only one varna, now we have 4 varnas, right? So in Satya Yuga people had a very simple consciousness, they were very renounced, detached, they followed everything nicely. So therefore they had enough peace of mind that they could simply sit down and meditate for thousands of years until they reach samadhi and then they go back to Godhead. So that's very difficult. So therefore, Krita Jayata Vishnu, Traitayam, Yajato Makai. Therefore, you see that there is the sacrifices. So just like you have the different sacrifices, some of them they even banned, completely banned in Kali Yuga. So the sacrifices are very, very costly, and they require a king, they require many staff members to do the sacrifice. You need somebody who is the sponsor of the yajna, so somebody who has the wealth. You need somebody who chants the mantra, somebody who does the physical thing, somebody who's the assistant. There's all names for these, which I forget. So it's very, very costly. And then not only that, in modern age, we just ask someone to do a service, but we don't remunerate them. But actually, according to Bhagavad Gita, there's different elements, which is a tamasic yajna. So one of them is adakshina. So then not only you have to have all of these staff to do the yajna for you, but you have to pay them very well. So it's not easy. Just like I was reading, this we'll get onto this in the class, but there was Solomon, right, one of the prophets in the Old Testament. So he built the temple again in Jerusalem. Was it Jerusalem? Somewhere around there. So it was called the temple in the name of God. That's what I'll mention later. But he actually had to pay so much to the people. He would give them like 1 ton of wheat. He would give them like 12,000 liters of wine. He had to pay them so many things in order to do this. So in a similar way, in order to do these yajnas, then there are so many brahmanas, and then you have to gorgeously remunerate them for their time, for their energy. And then you have to have ghee and so many grains. So even in the modern age, dairy is very expensive, right? Maybe not in England, but in generally a lot of countries. But actually, meat and dairy would be about 7 to 10 times more expensive if it was not subsidized by the government and they didn't use very kind of abusive farming techniques or animal husbandry techniques in order to, just like keeping them in very small pens, feeding them complete junk, and like doing so many things which we know about in the slaughterhouses, right? So actually, ghee is extremely expensive, therefore referred to, although it's also in other reasons, but one reason it's referred to as liquid gold is because gold is very expensive, limited resource. Ghee is also very expensive. So therefore, they had to use so much ghee, so many grains, so many resources. So therefore, that was very, very difficult to do. Only kings they could sponsor, or very rich people could sponsor such things. And those things are also banned in Kali Yuga. There was one. There are 5 things which are banned in Kali Yuga. Does anyone remember what they are? One we know always because it's famous. And you remember what one of the 5 things banned in Kali Yuga?
Jyotish?
Well, not according to this verse. I'm not sure in general. Maybe there's another verse somewhere. But not, yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Taking sannyas?
Taking sannyas, then?
Of doing horse yagya.
Horse yagya, yeah.
Doing, what is that doing?
You
Offering
remember?
meat to the forefathers?
Yep. Then 2 more.
Begetting a child as a vikar, as a substitute for a brother.
Through the brother, yeah. And then last one. Gavalambhyam. What does it mean, Gavalambhyam? This is Lord Chaitanya discussed with Chand Kazi, if you remember. Because Chand Kazi was saying, well, you also sacrifice animals.
Offering a cow.
Cow, yes. So those 5 things are banned. But actually in Satya and Treta Yuga, they were very, very qualified brahmanas and spiritualists and rishis. So they could do all of these 5 things. But gradually these things became reduced in the possibility to do them. So Ashwamedam Gavalambhyam Sanyasam Palapaitikam, and then Devarena Sutopatim Kalo Panchavivajaya. So this is actually in a Rajasic Purana. So sometimes people they say, especially Ritviks or people who are kind of have a vendetta against the sannyas ashram, that why do we have sannyas in Iskcon? It's not allowed, it says it in Shastra. So they asked this to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, because he was, because if you study our Sampradaya, generally it's more renunciates or Babajis and Grihasthas. So, but he wanted to preach, because obviously most of the Vaishnavas in India, they are Madhva followers, Sri Vaishnavas, and Vallabh followers. Well, at that time, Vallabh was starting, but different Sampradayas. So, they were asking, because Lord Chaitanya Sampradaya is not really so much sannyas, although Lord Chaitanya himself too, but generally we don't emphasize. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he wanted to put a lot of emphasis on sannyas, because that was what was respected at the time, and that was what other Vaishnava lines also had. But then they asked him that, why are you doing this sannyas? It says clearly here, I forget which Purana, I think it's Brahma Vaivata Purana. They said that, why do you put this sannyas in your preaching method, and you're giving so many people sannyas? And many of them fell down as well. Not only in Iskcon, sometimes we complain that, oh, Iskcon is bad. Actually, so that's the nature of Kali Yuga. So he said that although sannyas is very, very hard to follow, but for preaching he wanted to institute sannyas. And he said that this restriction is not there for Vaishnava sannyas, what is sannyas in the Bhagavad Gita. Like in Bhagavad Gita it says that a real sannyasi is not just one who cannot light fire and do certain external karma kind of things, but he's, Anashita karma phalam. He's detached from the phala, the karma phala, and he's acting in the service of the Lord. So that's a different type of sannyas. So karma sannyas, that is what's banned in Kali Yuga. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explained. Is karma kanda type of sannyas because it's a rajasic Purana. So it's in the context of what mode it's in. Not necessarily what mode it's in, but what mode of people is the target audience. So therefore he explained that no, actually our sannyas is different. This is the Bhagavata sannyas, so it's different than the karma sannyas. Therefore in Rupa Goswami he put so much emphasis, like Yukta Vairagam Uchate, Anasakta Vishaya, that one? Yeah. Anasaktasya Vishayan, Yatarhan Upayunjata, Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe, Yukta Vairagam Uchate. This is the sannyas which Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was establishing. That being detached from the sense objects, one uses them in the service of the Lord. And therefore he did very extremely controversial things, like wearing expensive British shoes, going in a Rolls Royce to Radhapur, which everyone were very, very strict. Babaji is very renounced. And everyone was taking Siddha Pranali, they were taking initiation, and then you get given your form. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he wanted to challenge them because they were doing, externally they were very renounced, but internally they were smoking and having so many girlfriends and so many things, but they are saying we're Babajis. So he was saying, although I have externally so many things, I'm completely renounced and I'm following sannyas. So he wanted to teach that actually to preach Krishna consciousness, that is the sannyas in Kali Yuga. So then we understand that those different items are banned. Sannyas, karma sannyas. Then cow sacrifice means you put the cow in the fire, old one and a new one comes out. But that nobody can do in Kali Yuga. And horse sacrifice. And then Pala Paitrika means offering of flesh to the forefathers. Just in general, Pinda is not recommended also in Kali Yuga, which means the worshipping the forefathers. If you study all actually non-Abrahamic religions around the world, basically all of them, they all have emphasis on worshipping forefathers. Although Bible itself says honor thy father and mother as one of the commandments, but they were very strict, like only Yeshua, only the God of the Old Testament, and then Jesus later on. But actually if you go to Japan, China, if you study even the native, like Scandinavian, Nordic, even Celtic, all of these groups, they all have emphasis on the forefathers. Because they understood the principle of appreciation, that if you want to advance, then you must give thanks to what you've received. But that is not recommended, especially offering meat to the forefathers. And then what was the last one? Devarena Sutopatim. So if you're infertile, then the brother can donate their sperm for the wife. But obviously in Kali Yuga, we see even to be married is not easy, let alone mixing of these things. So all of these things are banned in Kali Yuga. And then Dwapare Paricharyayam, that in Dwapara Yuga, the deity worship and doing all kinds of ceremonies in order to worship the Lord. We all know that that's very difficult as well. Even in Iskcon we find it hard sometimes to get enough pujaris, to have enough budget to offer the adequate things for the Lord. And also real deity worship means very high level of deity worship. That's called a Vedic Vidhi. But we only follow a more simplified version, which is called Pancharatric Vidhi, which is a little bit easier to follow. So deity worship, although it's not the Yuga Dharma and Kali Yuga, we still do it because Prabhupada said that Bhagavata Marga, which means like Shravanam, Kirtana, Vishnu, the 9 processes of bhakti, he said that that is enough. But because we are not regulated, we are not determined, and we are not disciplined, therefore Pancharachik Vidhi keeps us in check. And when you follow both together, then it will work nicely. So he gave the analogy, just like a train runs on 2 tracks, so Bhagavad Dharma and Pancharachik Vidhi together. Then the Pancharatric system keeps us regulated, waking up early and doing routine work. Because in Bhagavad Vidhi is simply the 9 processes. Bhagavad Vidhi doesn't take into account also bodily dharmas. But Pancharachik Vidhi, and especially Vedic, traditional Vedic Vidhi, is emphasizing also the specific roles according to Varna, gender and ashram, all of these. Whereas Bhagavad Vidhi doesn't really take into account those things. So to be on that level is not easy. Therefore Prabhupada emphasized Varnashram, especially in his late years, and also a Pancharatric system, as supports a lambana to the process of Bhagavad Dharma. And then, Kalotat, what is the Yuga Dharma in Kali Yuga? Someone remembers? Hari Kirtana, yeah. So that's very important. Not only Kirtan, but Hari Kirtan, because Lord Hari is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and not only Shravanam, but especially Kirtanam. So therefore, this is considered the Yuga Dharma in this age. So that is explained also by the 6 Goswamis, that what does it mean, Kirtan? Kirtan means Bahubir Militva Kirtyati Iti Sankirtan, that when people congregate in a plural number, and Militva Kirtyati, to glorify the Lord, that is what is defined as Kirtan. So, although japa is very important, that is not the Yuga Dharma. But Srila Prabhupada also emphasized japa because japa helps to deepen our relationship with the Lord, because it's a pure one-on-one phone call with the Lord. Whereas when you do Kirtan, there can be many distractions, right? Hridayananda Maharaj explains, he says, why did Prabhupada, there are many rules which we shouldn't do, 4 rules, but he only gave one thing we should do. So he said, why? Because other services, there's always some subtle impetus, some subtle labha, puja, pratishtha, some recognition, some name and fame, some internal glory can be there. But when you're doing japa, then there's none of that. It's impossible. Just like if you give a lecture and you give nice lecture, someone say, oh Prabhu, very nice. So then the ego feels, oh, I'm very nice, see? Somebody said. Or if you do deity worship very lovely, people think, wow, very expert. He knows all the mudras and everything. He knows many mantras. So they say, wow, this person is very advanced devotee. So then you feel, oh, I'm a big pujari now. Or if you can cook very nice, then people will glorify you. So then you feel, oh, I'm a big cook now. So whatever you do, we get some recognition, some name, fame, if you do it nicely. But japa, if you do it nicely, nobody knows. Because it's not enough simply to sit in lotus position, very straight, very serious face and chant. Because even one of our gurus, who later did so many crazy things in Iskcon, he was famous for sitting very powerfully. He wouldn't leave the seat and just chant like this. But later they found many bodies in the ground and so many things without getting in there. You all know if you know. If you know, you know, they say. So we can see that externally you can't tell who is chanting pure japa. So there is no name and fame in chanting japa. Japa is very pure because when you chant japa, there is no material motivation. If you eat prasadam, it's very tasty. If you do kirtan, it's nice music. If you see the deities, they look very beautiful, right? It's like once Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, someone came in, he was giving Harikatha, they came in, they took darshan and left. So as they were leaving, he says, did you enjoy your eye massage? He said, more important than to see the deity is to hear about the deity. And by hearing, then you can see the deity. So there are many external motivations. Either we get some name, fame, position, recognition, distinction, or we get some enjoyment, some pleasure. That's like, in Kirtan, it's like very nice musical, nice group atmosphere. But when you do japa, there is no material motivation. Because actually it's not easy. It's just purely you're trying to surrender to Krishna. There's nothing else to do. There's no other distraction. There's no motivation, nothing. Only you just chant japa sincerely. So therefore, japa is very important, Prabhupada emphasized, but the Yuga Dharma is to chant together, because it's explained that Sangha Shakti Kalo Yuga, that in Kali Yuga, the strength comes by numbers. Because japa is kind of like dhyana yoga, basically. So that's very good, but to do it alone is not enough. So therefore, the strength comes in numbers in Kali Yuga. So that's the first part of this purport. Prabhupada is mentioning that there are these 4 yugas, and each yuga, one is a meditation, sacrifice. Prabhupada says, gorgeous worship, and then lastly he says, only by chanting the holy name of the Lord. But we know that then he quotes, next part of the purport, that Kalo Dosha Nidhe Rajan, this verse, that Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults, but there is one good quality, Mahan Guna, Kirtana Deva Krishnasya Mukta Sangha Paramraja. That simply by chanting the holy name of Krishna, one will become liberated and get the highest goal, which is also the same thing mentioned here, Paramraja and Gati Ranyata, same thing. So we know that Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults, right? There's many, many difficult things. What is that verse? Which is describing the faults of Kali Yuga. How does it start? Okay. Anyway, there are different folds. How did it start? Prayena alpa ayushak sabha kalo asmin yugajana manda sumanda mateo manda bhagya yupadrita. How does it start again? Yeah, so the life is very short. Prayena alpa ayusha. The life is very short. Kalavasmin yugajana. This is the nature of the people in Kali Yuga. And they're very foolish and they're misguided. Manda sumanda mateo. And they're very low in intelligence. Manda bhagya. And they're very unfortunate. And upadruta means? So anyway, so this is that verse that in Kali Yuga there are so many problems. And it's explained that tatas chanu dinam dharma, that every day in Kali Yuga, dina means day, so tatas chanu anu dinam dharma, satyam, socham, shama and daya, they're gradually all reducing, already finished. So satyam, truthfulness, satyam, socham, cleanliness, shama, forgiveness, mercy, and daya, mercy. So these four things, they are reduced. And in Kali Yuga, generally is considered only one leg of dharma is still there, which is satyam. So I always wondered, what does it mean, satyam? Because we don't seem like we have much truthfulness in Kali Yuga. So I heard from Keshav Maharaj in 2 different lectures, what does it mean? One explanation he gave is that satyam means because Srimad Bhagavatam is still present in Kali Yuga. And then he gave another one recently. Does anyone remember what was the second one? For some reason he gave. Anyway, there's 2 different reasons he gave. One of them is because truthfulness is still present in Kali Yuga because Srimad Bhagavatam is the book personification of truthfulness. So therefore Srimad Bhagavatam was given specifically for Kali Yuga. That's also explained in the Bhagavatam. That when Krishna Sudam Utpagate, when he went back to his own land with Dharma, Jnana, etc., then this Kali Yuga became very dark, and it's a very dark and dingy, dangerous age. Dark, dingy, dangerous and dodgy. So this is the nature of Kali Yuga. But this Purana, there is one Purana which is like an arka, like a sun, which is Bhagavad Purana. So that's very important. So that's the next thing Prabhupada is mentioning here in the purport. Then he quotes also the Pancharatra, that there is Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, and Upasana Kanda, which is different modes of acting in the world. And then there are different hymns, etc., demigods. But all of those things, they are contained within the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So very powerful. All of these things, all of these processes, all of the benefits you can get by doing material pious activity, etc. It's like, generally in this world we think, oh, he's very spiritual, this person is doing a lot of charity work. But that's actually explained in Upanishad, that that's a material piety, but that does not give one liberation. That gives one a better position in this world. That's called Ishta Purtam, is described in one of the texts. So generally we think, Ramakrishna Mission, Vivekananda, Annie Besant, all of these people, they criticize Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that there was a drought or famine. Does anyone remember what exactly it was? Drought or famine, something like that. So a lot of people were starving and suffering. So then they said that you should give a lot of money and resources. You have a very powerful movement around the whole of India. He had tens of thousands of disciples. So they said to him that you should help us in doing this welfare work. And there's a scarcity, I think it was food, so there's scarcity of food. And then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said something very heavy. He says, I have studied this whole world, in his whole life, he says, there's only one thing which is scarce, which is the glorification of the Lord, Harikatha. That's only one thing which is scarce, not even food. They're very heavy. And then later, that's why he became called Lion Guru, because he's very fierce like a lion. He said, I've studied this world, there is no scarcity. The only scarcity is Harikatha, Harikatha. So very powerful. So therefore we know that the holy name contains everything. That's why it's called the Sarva Vedanta Sar as well. That's what Prabhupada says. This is the reality of all Vedanta. And where is this mantra given? Then Prabhupada explains here, later on in the purport, that the Kali Santra Upanishad states, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
So this mantra, these 16 names of 32 syllables, are the only means to counteract the evil effects of Kali Yuga. So, as much as possible, we have, because there is mentioned specifically, iti Shodasaka Namna, that these are 32 syllables. So sometimes, even me, we all do it, that when we chant, we should chant, if especially when we are singing fast, and we say Hare Ram, but technically we should be saying Rama because their mantra is 32 syllables. Ram is a Hindi and also in English we have this tendency that we chop off the final vowel. Just like most Latin words, Greek words, they end in vowels. Same thing in Sanskrit generally, especially nouns. But generally in Hindi they like to make everything short, like Arjun, Ram, etc. So those are vernacular languages, they are not the eternal Sanskrit language. So we should pronounce nicely if we're able to. Sometimes we forget and then we chant. Same thing in English, just like in Spanish say carro, in English say car. Right? So that's just laziness. So we shorten everything because we want it to be easy. So, but we should try and chant and remember Rama. I see sometimes there is a vendetta against Ramo. So once they asked Srila Bhakti Vikas Maharaj, because he's fluent Bengali, Hindi, etc., and very expert in Sanskrit, so they asked him that why does the devotee say Ramo? You know, there's one anecdote, we don't know directly for sure if it said, but they said, Prabhupada said to Vishnu Jan Swami that he was spoiling the movement chanting this Ramo. We don't know, it's not directly there in database, but somebody said anecdotal story. So we should also not sing Ramo, but he also explained that at the same time, it's not a big deal, because if you chant like, for instance, if you speak a Slavic language, you pronounce a lot of things good, because Slavic languages also end generally nouns in vowels, but they often say Hare Rama, so then they say Rama. So he said, many devotees sing Rama, that's worse, because Rama, that means Durga. So instead of chanting to Krishna, you're chanting to Durga. Or some people say Hare Rama, so Rama has different meaning as well. So he said, Ram and Rama at least, and Ramo, it all means the same thing. So the reason why do people sing Ramo, because when you sing high, then O requires less stretching of your vocal cords, so it's easier to sing. So it's a natural biological reflex to turn A's into O's. So he explained that in Bengali it's very common. He said maybe even the Acharyas may have sung in a Bengali accent, we don't know. So he said although it's not the correct vowel, but we should be more wary of if we change a vowel and the meaning changes. That's more dangerous. So then he quotes Narayan Samhita that in Dwapara Yuga, one can satisfy Krishna or Vishnu by worshipping according to Dita or Pancharatric system. And in the age of Kali Yuga, one can satisfy and worship the Supreme by chanting the holy name. Then he quotes a very big text by Jiva Goswami in Sanskrit and giving a lot of evidence why the Hare Krishna mantra is important. It's quite a big purport. Then later he emphasizes, again, deity worship and the balance of deity worship and chanting the holy name. We have only a few minutes left, so I'll just show you, read to you one very nice verse which I found yesterday about the difference between Harinam Sankirtan and Japa. So it's explained. Japato Harinamani stane shata gunadika atmanam cha punati uche Japa Shrotrin Punati Cha. So it's explaining that compared to Japa of the holy name, Harinamani, that performing the loud chanting of the holy name is 100 times better. And any person who chants Japa, they purify themselves. But if you chant loudly in Kirtan, then Japa and Shrotrin, both the chanter and the hearer become purified. Punati Cha. So that's also very important. And what is the best way to do Harinam Sankirtan is to do it to reach the most people, right? Because as we already heard the definition that of Sankirtan, that complete Kirtan, complete glorification means that Bahubir Militva, when many people congregate. So the more people you have, the more powerful the yajna becomes. And so therefore also chanting outside in public was very much emphasized by Srila Prabhupada, because that has much more power. Just like if one person chants, there is some power, and if many people chant, there is 100 times the power. So the more you distribute the holy name, then the more and more the yajna becomes expanded in that way. So that's very important. And at the same time, just simply chanting is not enough. Just like we see online, there are many groups. There's one group with the Ben Tilak, and a little bit like Sri Vaishnava. There is some Sai Baba groups, and there is some followers of another Baba from Vrindavan who was kind of Mayavadi. So they all chant Hare Krishna, and if you see their videos, many times they're much more famous than us. You can see around the world, they have millions and millions of views. But what is the difference between that chanting and this chanting? That is explained that Sampradaya Vihinaste Mantra Nishvalamata. That if you do not receive mantra in a proper Sampradaya, then the mantra does not have any fruit. And therefore, instead of becoming transcendental activity, at best it can become only pious activity. Because Acharyas explained that we have three types of chanting, right? So Nama Parad at best can give you punya, can give you material piety. So therefore, we see many of these people, they are externally chanting so nicely, but because they are not following in the line of Sampradaya, the mantra does not have an effect, which is that to give you the Gati Ranyatan, to give you the, what is the other verse? To give you the top Paramam Gati, to give you the topmost goal, the topmost destination, which is to go back to Krishna in the spiritual world. So that's very important and that's very strongly emphasized. So in that verse, it's explained that there are only 4 authorized Sampradayas. So if you do not come in one of these 4 line Vaishnava Sampradaya, then your mantra will not have fruit. That's explained in Padma Purana. So that's very important. So if you have the bent Tilak Sampradaya, which is Upper Sampradaya, no benefit. We cannot say names, so you have to be careful. But many of you may know. So there are many things which people do, there are many mantras people chant, but we know that Prabhupada has quoted already the Upanishads, the Vedas, original Shruti, you can say, literatures, that specifically the 16 word, 32 syllable mantra, that is the one which is given for Kali Yuga. And what does it say in that verse? Sarva Vedeshu Drishite. This is the vision of all of the Vedas. Not only opinion, mati, but the vision. So vision is given more importance to opinion or to speaking. That's why it's called darshan, right? So that is the most important. So we'll just a couple of minutes left. Okay, so what is the Hare Krishna mantra? We have learned that there's 4 yugas. In this yuga is Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Prabhupada also emphasized deity worship is important to balance our chanting. We have learned that japa is important and it's the most pure service because there is no external motivation. But also on top of that, grouping together and chanting congregation is more powerful. So now the last 2 points is what is the meaning of the mantra and what is the other thing I wanted to discuss? Something else, I forget now. So what is the meaning of Hare Krishna Maha Mantra? So this was a controversy. I was really trying to find the original reference to this because I heard it like 6 years ago in a lecture. And I was trying to search online, I couldn't find. But just if my Kali Yuga memory serves me right, then it's right. If anyone knows the story, they can correct me. So if I understand correctly, the devotees were preaching in Hyderabad in the 70s, in Srila Prabhupada's time. And then they were interviewed in a newspaper. So in the newspaper, they were asking, what is the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra? So then they presented one perspective of what does Rama mean. Because everyone knows what Krishna means, but Rama seems very confusing because there is Balaram, there is Parashuram, and there is Radharaman, and any other Ramas? Ramachandra, yeah. So one of the opinion, I forget which they put in the newspaper, it was either Ramachandra or Balaram. So then the Gaudiya Math local, because Bhaktisiddhanta opened 64 principal maths, so in Hyderabad they have a successful math there, especially that time. So they read the newspaper and then they were criticizing Srila Prabhupada. That why are you saying that it's this one, it should be Krishna. Rama is another name for Krishna, that's what it should be. So then they asked Srila Prabhupada that, some people they say, no, Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, it means Lord Ramachandra. Some they're saying it means Balaram, and some they're saying it means like Krishna, another name for Krishna. And so then Prabhupada said that actually there is no difference. And there is one verse which he quoted, that actually it's an offense to think that all of these forms of Krishna, they're different than each other. They're all one, they're all avatari. So, although we can say that demigod name and Krishna's name is different, but then all of the names of Krishna, they're all one, because all of the forms of Krishna, they're all the same tattva, they're all Vishnu tattva. So therefore he said that actually it refers to all of them, because it's all the same person. Although it's different forms, but it's the same Krishna behind them. So he said actually all of them, they're okay. So he gave a very good answer, everyone was satisfied. But Gaudiya Math, they were very strict, because obviously they're very well studied in Gaudiya Acharya's literatures. So, Gopal Guru, I think, in one of his books, then he explains what are the meanings. So he says that because also, this is not that story, but another story is what Hare means. That's another controversy. So he explains there that Hare means, because Hara is one name for Radharani or Shakti Tattva. So therefore Hara, and then when you put it in the vocative case, when you're calling, then that makes it Hare. So then they said, okay, Hare means Radharani, and then Krishna obviously means Krishna, and Rama is another name for Krishna. So it's also another name for just the Brahma in general, the material, spiritual energy in general. So he said that that refers to Radharaman. So that's another name for Krishna, right? So therefore Rama could also be Radharaman. So that's what one of the acharyas say. So there's, and also I think one of the six Goswami, they also say the same thing. But even Prabhupada and other places, then they say also Ramachandra. Some people say that. So we can understand all of these are correct because it's all the same Krishna at the end of the day. But then second controversy, because if you study Hari, generally it's always like Hare Nama, and then we heard Harinam Param, and then also in this other verse Prabhupada quoted, Hari is again mentioned. And then the same one I mentioned, Japato Hari Nam Nami. So it's always saying Hari's name all the time. So therefore Hare Krishna is just three names of Krishna, that's another option. Because Hari in vocative case becomes Hare also. So both Hari and Hara, grammatically they both can become Hare. So, but Prabhupada's answer was that they're all correct because they're all referring to Krishna. And Radharani is also connected to Krishna, so there's no harm. So, yeah, generally in India people like to be very picky about these things, but Srila Prabhupada, he emphasized that if according to Siddhanta is correct, then why not welcome all of them? There's no harm. So that's another very important point. And this is the last thing I wanted to mention, we forget. And then everything is covered. So, Kirtan does not simply mean to sing, because sometimes we think that Kirtan is just singing, right? Like I'm a Kirtan singer, or I'm a Kirtaniya. So actually Kirtan does not mean to sing, but the word Kirtan means to glorify. Therefore when you study Srimad Bhagavatam, the word Sankirtan is used often. But it's never used in terms of singing, if you've noticed. But why? Because all of the Naimisharanya sages which got together to listen to Srimad Bhagavatam, what they're doing there is called Sankirtan also. Because why? That's what six Goswamis themselves explain, that when many people come together to do Kirtan, Kirtayati, iti Sankirtan. So Sankirtan just means when many people come together to glorify the Lord. So therefore Sankirtan has a broader definition, which means to glorify the Lord. That's called Kirtan. So Kirtan literally means to glorify the Lord. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when he said Hari Kirtan, many times he's referring to spoken Kirtan. He used Hari Katha and he used Hari Kirtan, these two words. So that's very important. So if we want to do actually Kirtan properly and actually get any result, get any benefit, then we have to do it in the mood of Kirtan, not in the mood of Gayana. Gayana means to sing. So it's not a musical enterprise. So what does it mean to glorify? First, to glorify means to know the glories, right? It's like there's one lecture, Tirunatha, who gave a very heavy lecture, and he was saying that actually we want to glorify the Lord, but if we do not read the books, we don't know the glories. So then if you don't know the glories, how can we glorify the Lord? And then he also said that the devotee, one of the qualities of the devotee is a kritagya, which means you know what people have done for you, which means grateful. So then he makes a play on words. He says that gratefulness means to be thankful for something great. So that's very interesting definition. Huh? Grateful means thankful for something great. So he said that if you do not study the Srimad Bhagavatam, then how will you know what's great about Krishna? And if you don't know what's great about Krishna, then you won't become grateful. And if you're not grateful, then you will not advance in spiritual life. So therefore it's very important that Kirtan is not a musical enterprise, but Kirtan means to actually study Srila Prabhupada's books and to be able to glorify, not only in terms of singing nicely, 108 melodies an hour, all of these things. We can do also some elaborate Kirtan, that's okay. But very important is also to be able to glorify the Lord, both in terms of spoken, to understand the glories of the Lord. Doesn't mean you have to be a lecturer, because some people are shy by nature. Maybe if they sit here, their mind will go blank. But you should be able to glorify just spontaneously, have some feeling, have some attraction. Not only glorify in that sense, but one should also, if they feel that I have taste for holy name when I'm singing kirtan, they should have equally, to the extent you have taste for chanting in kirtan, it should be equal to your taste in japa and taste in reading. If it's not equal, then your taste for kirtan means there's some sentiment mixed in. Because the Lord is absolute. So therefore, if you have taste for kirtan but you don't have taste for japa, then means you're not attached to holy name. Because holy name is also there in japa. You may be attached somewhat, but that means there's some material sentiment mixed in. So Harinam Chintamani describes all of these elements. So it's not that it's bad, okay, so I stop doing kirtan. No, we should do kirtan, but while we're doing musical kirtan, if you do not have taste for japa, then we pray to Krishna that please, I want to develop a relationship with the holy name. Please help me to advance in my taste for japa. Same thing with reading. Reading not easy. Most people don't have taste. So then what we do, we can pray whilst in kirtan that just as I'm glorifying you in the form of Harinam Kirtan, please let me also get taste for the biggest Sankirtan Yaga, which was in Naimisharanya. 7 days. So we do 24-hour kirtan, they did 7 times 24-hour kirtan. So how much is that? 140, 154 is it? Or was my maths useless? So 154 hours kirtan. So imagine. So we think 24 hours is a big thing, and they were not even singing. They didn't have mridanga, kata, so it was more fun. They're just sitting and listening for 7 days. So you can see that is the real Sankirtan Yaga. So if we have taste for this Sankirtan Yaga, we should also have taste for that Sankirtan Yaga. So that's also very important. And if you do not have taste, that's okay. Just we have to pray, because the only way to get taste is to ask Krishna for taste. So to the extent we are free from lust, anger, greed, envy, then to that extent we will get taste again. But in order to become purified, we need Krishna's help. So we will now do that for the next 4 days. We will beg Krishna to get taste. I've been chanting so many years, but we don't have any taste. So then Krishna will help us. So thank you very much. Is there any question or comment? So thank you very much. And we have another seminar, 10:30?
10:30, yes.
So take breakfast and then we'll meet again in like an hour and a half. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.